What's happening, everybody? Week 8 SEC winners and losers. Georgia looks like Georgia. Bama loses again, and Texas throws stuff on the field. Welcome to the SEC, Longhorns.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. On today's show, we'll run through our winners and losers of the week in the SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's dive right into it as we get into our winners of the weekend. And first up, among our winners, it is Kirby Smart over at Georgia. And I was saying all last week, I didn't know why Georgia was a 5-point underdog to Texas when Georgia was the preseason number 1 team and the same program that went 42-2 over the past 3 seasons. With 2 national championships. They didn't just forget how to play football, folks. It was the Bulldogs' first trip to Austin since 1958. They never trailed in this one. Georgia shut out the Longhorns in the first half, jumped out to a 23-0 halftime lead. Kirby Smart saying after the game, nobody gave us a chance. Everybody doubted us. He even cited the College Game Day pregame show. Everybody picked Texas to win the game. Kirby said, did you watch the show this morning? I didn't, but I got an 8,000 text about it. And kudos to Kirby Smart. He picks up his 100th career win in 117 games over 9 seasons. Kirby beats out Nick Saban to become the fastest SEC coach to ever reach 100 career wins. He also has 51 consecutive wins against teams not named Alabama. Seems like maybe more people should have known that stat prior to Saturday's game. Defense set the tone for the Dogs. 7 sacks on the night, forcing 4 turnovers that Georgia turned into 17 points. And that Georgia defense, led by linebacker Jalen Walker, who led the team with 8 tackles, a fumble recovery, 3 sacks, a career high for him. He also had 1.5 sacks week 1 against Clemson. Just a monster night from the junior linebacker. And that Georgia defense, like we said, 7 sacks on the night, 10 tackles for a loss. Dalen Everett with an interception. Also want to give a shout out to Peyton Woodring. He was perfect, 3 for 3 on field goals. Texas did a good job of forcing Georgia to keep kicking field goals, but credit to Woodring for executing them. And a nod to running back Trevor Etienne. He had all 3 of Georgia's touchdowns with 87 rushing yards. And now Georgia looking much like the team they were supposed to be before the season. Still some tests ahead. Going to Ole Miss, a home game against Tennessee. But this feels like the Dogs are getting healthy. Michael Williams was back in there. It seems like they could certainly go on a run, and a team we very well could see in Atlanta for the SEC championship. One more note on Georgia, though. Quarterback Carson Beck completed just 56% of his passes this week. No touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He now has 8 picks over his last 4 games played. He threw 6 total interceptions all of last year. Carson Beck does improve to 19-2 as a starter, 7-2 against ranked teams, but man, he's got to start cleaning up those mistakes. Another winner of the weekend. How about the Tennessee defense? Tennessee got a monster home win over 7th-ranked Alabama, winning 24-17, as the Vol defense had 3 sacks and intercepted Jalen Milroe twice, the last one securing the victory in the final minutes. James Pierce with 1.5 sacks. Jermod McCoy had that interception in the end zone that he returned 54 yards. And Will Brooks with the game-sealing pick. They held Bama to just 7 points in the first half and then just 10 points in the second half. Bama had just 314 total yards on the day, and they were just 3 of 14 on 3rd downs, 1 of 2 on 4th downs. In rushing, Bama had 34 carries for just 75 rushing yards. Credit DC Tim Banks. They had a fantastic game plan to slow down that Alabama offense, and they got it done defensively. And after losing 15 straight on that 3rd Saturday in October, Tennessee has now won 2 of their last 3 against Alabama and 2 straight at home. Offensively, Nico Iamaleava didn't play great, but he made some nice throws when he needed to. In a 55-yarder to Dante Thornton, a 16-yard touchdown pass to Chris Brassel on the go-ahead score. And really the other big winner of the night, how about Dylan Sampson? 26 carries, 139 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, averaged over 5 yards a carry versus Alabama. We're not used to that with the running game against Bama. And Dylan Sampson, far and away, leading the SEC in rushing yards now with 838 rushing yards on the ground. His 17 touchdowns ranked second in FBS. He has been Tennessee's MVP so far this season, and with 5 games to go, excited to see what more he is going to do. Another impress of the weekend, how about Brady Cook? Brady Cook exited Saturday's game versus Auburn and made a trip to the hospital to have an MRI exam on his injured ankle, only to return to the game and lead his team to 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, including the game-winning rushing touchdown he handed off with 46 seconds left to beat Auburn 21-17. Brady Cook got hurt on the opening drive, did not return again until the third quarter. Drew Pine filled in for him. Cook saying after the game, ultimately, I realized I had 2.5 games left to play at 4-0 Field. We were going to find a way. He said he had his pads off at the hospital, but decided he wanted to finish the game. And as time was slipping away, Cook came in to lead a legacy-making drive that kept Mizzou's playoff hopes alive. Eli Drinkwitz saying after the game, that's their guy. They believe in him more than anybody else. We all do. Nobody doubts that guy. Mizzou and Brady Cook next up. They will face Alabama this coming Saturday. Big, big test. But, man, what the chutzpah on a Brady Cook to do what he did to come back. Pretty impressive stuff for him. Literally, dude was at the hospital and said, I got to get back to the game. Get me over there. Incredible comeback performance for Mizzou. They look dead to rights at one point. We'll get to Auburn a little bit later in the show. Another winner of the weekend, how about Caden Durham at LSU? After struggling to run the football the first few weeks of the season, LSU's run game is starting to come around as the true freshman Caden Durham had 21 carries for 101 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on the road as LSU beat Arkansas 34-10. It was Durham's second 100-yard game of the season, and he now has 8 total touchdowns in 6 games played. And after that week 1 loss to USC in Las Vegas, Brian Kelly's bunch has now won 6 in a row. Garrett Nussmeier is 6th in the country in total passing yards, and LSU with a monster game in College Station this Saturday as the Tigers and Aggies are the lone unbeaten teams in SEC play. And speaking of Texas A&M, while they won at Mississippi State on Saturday, 34-24, they may not have covered the spread, but Texas A&M won their 6th in a row. And the same thing for them. After losing week 1 to Notre Dame, they've improved to a heck of a run under first-year head coach Mike Elko. And you look at their remaining schedule, home versus LSU, at South Carolina, New Mexico State, at Auburn, and home versus Texas. The Aggies can find a way to just go 4-1 down the stretch. That should be good enough to get them into the playoff, or maybe even perhaps into the SEC title game if they could beat LSU this weekend. Le'Veon Moss, he ran for 2 more rushing touchdowns this weekend. He is 2nd in the SEC in total rush yards. That will be a heck of a battle this weekend. We'll see how LSU slows down that Aggie rushing attack. Another winner of the weekend. Hey, remember when everybody was ready to run Billy Napier out of town? Well, don't look now, but the Florida Gators demolished Kentucky at home 48-20 on Saturday night. And the Gators are above 500. They improved to 4-3 on the season, 2-2 in SEC play. Freshman running back DJ Lagway threw for 259 yards. But how about the freshman running back Jaden Baugh, 22 carries, 106 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. Unbelievable. Wide receiver Elijah Badger had 3 catches for 148 yards. And now Florida is just 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. And granted, the remaining stretch is tough. They'll play Georgia and Jacksonville. They're at Texas, home versus LSU and Ole Miss, and then at FSU, although that one looks very winnable. Can Billy Napier pull off an upset in one of his next 4 games? If he does, he could go 6-6, and you have to think that would save his job. And you consider this, all these young, talented freshmen that Florida's playing, Billy Napier recruited these kids. Lagway and Baugh, they were the first true freshmen to start at quarterback and running back together in program history. And they stepped in for veterans who had made a combined 67 starts with Graham Mertz and Montrell Johnson. And the Gators look more explosive with the 2 freshmen. Maybe that future could start to look brighter under Napier with DJ Lagway at the helm for the foreseeable future. We'll see how that plays out. Also, tip of the cap to Cormani McClain, a 5-star recruit from Lakeland, spent last season at Colorado. He had a interception, returned to 29 yards for a touchdown in the fourth quarter. And good to see him out on the field as he had a tumultuous offseason trying to figure out where he was going to go. Was he going to get on the field for Florida and all of that? Another winner of the weekend. How about South Carolina's defense? Look, I know Oklahoma's offense stinks, but Shane Beamer's bunch put on a butt-kicking 35-9 in Norman as the Gamecocks improved to 4-3 on the season. They had 9 sacks on Saturday. Tonka Hemingway, Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, TJ Sanders, Demetrius Knight. I mean, the list goes on and on with all the guys who had a sack. Nick Emanwari had 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. And really, you think if Carolina could have pulled off those close losses to Bama and LSU, they could be sitting here at 6-1. That's how much better they are. They held Kentucky to 6 points, Akron to 7, and now OU to 9. Shout out to DC Clayton White. He is getting it done. And a huge game against Texas A&M looms in 2 weeks. But after that, it's at Vandy, home versus Mizzou, home versus Wofford. At Clemson will be tough, but you got to think they should get at least 2 more wins. The Gamecocks will be going bowling after missing out last season. Another winner of the weekend, how about Vandy? Look, nobody watched this game, I get it, but Vandy, they had a sleepy win over Ball State, 24-14. Game was tied at 14 at one point in the second half before Vandy woke up and pulled away. Diego Pavia threw for 275 yards in a score, rushed for 82 yards in a score. Eli Stowers caught 8 passes for 130 yards and a touchdown. And Clark Lee's bunch, they are now 5-2 overall, 1 win away from a bowl game. They got some tough games ahead. They host Texas this week. They finish the season at LSU and home versus Tennessee. But a road trip to Auburn and a home game against South Carolina, those are probably their best chances at least 1 more win. And I think Vandy can do it. But heck, we'll see. They might shock the world and do something, be one of those other teams. Honorable mention this week, I got Michael Van Buren. I thought Mississippi State had a chance to pull off the upset of Texas A&M and Starkville on Saturday. And with less than 7 minutes to play, it was still a 1-score game. They just couldn't get a stop defensively and couldn't get that 1 more scoring drive done. But credit to true freshman Michael Van Buren, threw for 242 yards, 3 touchdowns versus a pretty darn good A&M defense. And that's now back-to-back games with 3 touchdown passes each. And he did it against Georgia and Texas A&M, 2 of the better defenses in the SEC. Keep an eye on Mississippi State. If Van Buren keeps executing this Jeff Lebby offense, there's a chance they're going to pull off an upset soon. Next up, they host Arkansas on Saturday. And there you have it. That's the latest going on around the conference with our winners who depressed us, who are our losers in SEC Week 8. We'll get to that next right here on Locked On SEC. Well, first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is brought to you by friends over at Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your next rough day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you will feel your best the next day. Every time you try prebiotics, you will notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, you could plan on feeling better the next day without worry. And I'm excited. They just sent us a trial to try it out, and I'm excited to look. I didn't get drunk over the weekend, but next engagement that we will be having several adult beverages. We're going to try out Z-Biotics and heard great results so far from all of our Locked On friends who have tried it. If you want to try it out, go check them out at zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. Learn more, get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. Use our code LockedOnCollege at checkout to get 15% off. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. We did our winners of the weekend. Now let's get to our losers of the weekend. And first off, I think Texas, I think they're still a pretty darn good football team. But I said all last week, the number one ranked Longhorns had not really been tested yet. They had a road win over Michigan that had zero offense, and their two SEC wins were over Mississippi State and Oklahoma, two of the weaker offenses. And the vibe I was getting all last week was just that Georgia was going to punch them in the mouth. And thus, welcome to the SEC, Texas. Georgia shuts them out in the first half. Sark even at one point makes a change. They put in Arch Manning to kind of see if he can give them a spark. They end up going back to Quinn Ewers in the second half. They were able to score 15 points in the third quarter, but that was all as Georgia shut them out in the fourth quarter. Texas had just 38 yards of offense at halftime. And really for the first time since that week one win against Clemson, we saw what Georgia is supposed to look like this season. 15-point loss was the most lopsided for a number one ranked team at home since Notre Dame lost 31-16, or rather Notre Dame won 31-16 at Pittsburgh in 1982. That was a game where Dan Marino was the quarterback for Pitt. I just thought it was a big ask for this Longhorn team to go unscathed in their first season in the SEC, even with the soft draw of a schedule they got from the conference. Keep in mind, Texas this year avoids LSU. They avoid Alabama. They avoid Tennessee. They avoid Mizzou. Now, look, say what you want about those teams. I still think those are, four of the better teams in the conference. And yes, Texas took a leap forward last year, but they still lost to Oklahoma, and they sweat out wins against Houston and Kansas State and TCU. They lost to Washington in the playoff. The year prior, under Steve Sarkisian, they lost to teams like Texas Tech and Oklahoma State and TCU. No offense to Sark, but I just think Texas will never go undefeated with an SEC schedule now. This is the parity that is in the SEC. It's just tough to go unscathed and undefeated. And I had Longhorn fans telling me last week, we're going undefeated. I just didn't think that was going to happen. Now, again, it's still a good Texas team. Can they still make the playoff? Yes. But this was the Longhorns' biggest test so far in the SEC. And it turned into a jarring reminder of how difficult things can be in the SEC. Texas has lost its last 5 home games against top 5 opponents since a win over number 3 Nebraska in 1999 when they were in the Big 12. Now, that said, it's all about how you respond now, Longhorns. A road trip at Vandy this weekend. Then you're home against an improving Florida team. You're at Arkansas, which could be slipping now. Home versus Kentucky, who is really struggling now. And at A&M, who seems to be surging under Mike Elko. Will Texas lose another game? I think they could. But even if they do, 10-2 should still be good enough to get them into the playoff. But how many other 11-1 or 10-2 teams will they be up against? Again, pathway still looks pretty good for Texas to do some damage, but certainly a humbling home loss with Matthew McConaughey and all the celebrities they had in town in Austin. Again, I said, welcome to the SEC, Texas. Now, the other dirty of the night. How about losers of the weekend? Texas fans, and not all Texas fans, but the Texas fans who threw crap on the field. Texas was fined $250,000 by the SEC office for throwing garbage on the field at one point in the third quarter. The SEC putting out an announcement on Sunday saying that they're fining them $250,000 and that Texas must use all available resources to help identify who threw stuff on the field. School released a statement saying they appreciate the passion of their Texas fans, but they do not condone throwing objects onto the field. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey saying in a statement, the throwing of debris and resulting interruption of play that took place Saturday night cannot be part of any SEC event. Now, the conference even went on to say they're not suspending alcohol sales privilege for the University of Texas at this time, but they do reserve the right to do so if other requirements outlined in their request are not met. So can you imagine Texas maybe losing alcohol sales if they don't shape up, stop throwing crap on the field? Now, the other loser of the weekend in this one were the SEC referees in this Georgia-Texas game. With 2:40 left in the third quarter, Texas trailing 23-8. Carson Beck threw an interception to Jahdae Brown, but pass interference was called, seeming to wipe out the play. And what followed was an ugly sequence. Texas fans littering the field with water bottles and other beer bottles and other items. And after a lengthy delay, the SEC referees picked up the penalty and overturned the call. Now, the SEC released a statement early Sunday morning saying officials made the proper decision with their decision to not call a penalty on the play. And look, the reality is it was a weak call. There wasn't much contact, and at the time, it was a huge play to wipe out. But the problem here is, even before the debris on the field, the officials did meet and confer and decide to call the penalty. It was only after the anger and the debris on the field that they met a second time and decided to pick up the flag. Kirby Smart saying after the game, I will say that now that you've set a precedent, that you throw a bunch of stuff on the field and endanger athletes to get what you want. The reality is, this isn't a hate Texas thing, because at the end of the day, Georgia won and the play largely doesn't matter. But this seems like a bad precedent to set for SEC officiating, saying, look, if you throw a fit, you cause a scene, we'll just give you what you want because we're afraid of you. No doubt this will be a topic that will need to be addressed in the offseason by John McDade and the SEC officiating office. But my goodness, the number of Georgia fans I saw on social media saying, are you kidding me? How do you overturn that? Like, all because they threw stuff on the field and you guys converged again and went, hey, maybe we pick up this penalty. And again, for Texas fans, it was a bad call. I get it. And it was a huge moment in the game, right? They end up overturning it. Texas gets the ball into Georgia territory and goes and scores and makes it, a 2-score game. And suddenly this thing's a lot closer. But yeah, just certainly a moment that will not go away anytime soon. People will definitely remember this one. All right, let's get to other losers of the weekend. How about over at Oklahoma? Offense coordinator Seth Littrell. Brent Venables announcing on Sunday he has decided to fire his first-year offensive coordinator after 7 games. Co-OC Joe John Finley will take over play-calling duties. Sooners currently rank 128th in total offense. They just lost to South Carolina 35-9 and dropped to 1-3 in SEC play. That is 2 straight games OU has failed to score in double digits. Now, OU is still 4-3 overall. They just need 2 more wins to get to a bowl game. They host Maine still, so that'll be a win. But one more win. Can they win at Ole Miss? Can they win at Mizzou, home versus Bama, or at LSU? It's tough to find a win in there for OU. Another depressed of the weekend. How about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama? Look, I said it before the season. I think Kalen DeBoer is a good football coach, but I thought the schedule for Alabama was going to be a tough one that would result in several losses. And I had them losing to Georgia, who they beat, but they lost to Vanderbilt, who nobody had them losing to, and now lost to Tennessee, which I predicted they lose that one, falling 24-17 on Saturday. I also think they very well could lose at LSU, and I wouldn't take Mizzou lightly this weekend. But for DeBoer to have 2 losses already in mid-October, the Tide have not lost twice before the end of October since 2007, Nick Saban's first year. Kalen DeBoer saying after the game, you got to look inward first and make sure everything you're doing is right. I think for me, what I'm most disappointed for DeBoer is this offense. They rank 7th in the SEC in yards per game. They're 4th in the SEC in scoring. I just thought with Jalen Milroe, the line healthy, these running backs, the breakout of freshman running back Ryan Williams, you would think DeBoer and Nick Sheridan's track records that this would be one of the better offenses in the country. Bama ranks 44th in the country in third down conversions behind the likes of SMU, Sam Houston State, and Illinois. Now, the question is, can Alabama still run the table? They could, but it doesn't seem likely. And for having perhaps the most talented roster he's ever had in his coaching career, for Kalen DeBoer, he seems very much to be underachieving. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC. We got a few more depressed losers of the weekend. We will get to that here coming up in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented to you by Game Time, the Game Time app. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And Game Time Picks will filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The Game Time Picks with their curation makes it easier to save more on sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is. Of course, the all-in pricing feature, you could toggle that feature to show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkouts. Seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, continue on here. Locked On SEC. We're running through our losers of the weekend and got a few more to jump into here. So let's dive into it as we get back into it. And let's head over to the plains of Auburn as Hugh Freeze. Speaking of underachieving, good Lord, Hugh Freeze. Auburn led at Mizzou 17-14 with under 4 minutes to go. And Mizzou marches right down the field on a 17-play, 95-yard touchdown drive to win 21-17. Auburn had just 286 total yards of offense. They were 4 for 14 on third down, and Auburn dropped to 2-5 on the season, 0-4 in the conference. And Auburn has now lost 4 straight, 5 of their last 6. They have failed to score 20 points in 4 of those losses. And offense is supposed to be Hugh Freeze's specialty. Peyton Thorne played okay. He had yet another turnover, a lost fumble in this one. And Auburn ranks 14th in the SEC in points per game. Their only wins this season are against Alabama, A&M, and New Mexico. He got to win in the conference, Hugh. They do have 3 winnable games next. They'll play Vandy, they'll play UL Monroe, they'll play Kentucky. Question is, can they win these 3 and get to 5 wins? Then they would need an upset either versus A&M or at Alabama to get to a bowl game. Does not seem likely right now for Hugh Freeze. Tough go. Another loser of the weekend. How about Sam Pittman over at Arkansas? They started impressively 4-2 to start the year. And in a rivalry game versus LSU that has been decided by 3 points in the past 3 meetings, Arkansas put up a big fat dud at home versus LSU, losing 34-10, with Jaquindon Jackson leaving the game early with an injury. Razorbacks could not run the football much at all. 19 carries for just 38 net yards. Taylon Green, he threw for 239, moved the ball through the air at times, 1 touchdown and an interception. But Rashad Dubinion lost a fumble. Isaiah Satania lost a fumble. And that Bobby Petrino offense failed to put up 300 yards on the day versus what seems to be, I guess, an improving LSU defense. The Hogs, they need 2 more wins for a bowl game. They should beat Louisiana Tech, but can they get 1 more? They are at Mississippi State this weekend. That could be the one. They still have to play Ole Miss, Texas, and at Mizzou. Going to be tough to win in those. Another loser of the weekend, I got Mark Stoops in here. A few weeks ago, he lost to Georgia by just 1 and then upset top 10 ranked Ole Miss. And it seemed like Mark Stoops' Kentucky squad might be turning a corner, but then they lost at home to Vandy and then got demolished by Florida this weekend, 48-20. And now the Cats are 3-4 overall, 1-4 in the SEC. And they've got an offensive problem. Brock Vandergrift, just 12 of 26 for 165 yards, 2 interceptions. Stoops saying after the game, pretty tough loss. They were physically very much pushing us around and moving us up front. Felt like we were playing catch up the entire day. Overall, a pretty good butt whipping there. And now attention is focused on Mark Stoops, as he is the 9th highest paid coach in college football, and he is 17-16 over his past 3 seasons now. Wildcats gave up their most points in any game this season, including 24 in the second quarter. Very uncharacteristic of a Mark Stoops coach team, and undisciplined. They still have to play games at Tennessee, at Texas, their rival game versus Louisville, a big home game this weekend against Auburn looms. If they still want to go bowling, they've got to win this one. Those are our winners and losers of the weekend. Let's get to the Associated Press poll coming out of week 8, heading into week 9. And here is how it shapes up. Oregon moves up to number 1. Georgia with the win at Texas, they slide up to number 2. Penn State 3, Ohio State 4, Texas slides back to 5. So a little bit of movement there. Georgia up to 2, Texas down to 5. Still 2 SEC teams in the top 5. Behind them, you got Tennessee moving up to number 7, LSU at number 8. So 4 SEC teams in the top 8. Behind them, you got Texas A&M sitting at 14. Alabama slides all the way to 15. That looks weird to see. Alabama Crimson Tide with the number 15 next to it. Ole Miss, they're coming off their bye. They're ranked 18th. Missouri ranked number 21. And how about Vanderbilt? Take a bow, Vanderbilt. They jump into the top 25 for the first time in over a decade, coming in at number 25. Now, look, the win over Ball State wasn't all that impressive, but a win is a win. And sitting at 5-2, pretty darn impressive stuff for them. I did see Indiana is also ranked. Somebody tweeted out the last time Indiana and Vanderbilt were both ranked in the top 25. You go back to like 1937. Pretty crazy stuff. But hey, 9 SEC teams there in the top 25. We'll take it. And just goes to show, with all the parity in the conference, still pretty good showing so far from the SEC. 9 teams ranked that high, 4 in the top 8. We will see how many teams the SEC will get into the college football playoff, but still a lot of work to do before then. Keep this in mind too. I've heard people talking about or debating about how many teams will the SEC get in and all this. Keep in mind, remember these rankings don't matter for the committee. They're going to come up with their own rankings, and the top 4 seeds are all conference champions. The highest ranked conference champions all moved to the front of the line. So I saw people going, oh yeah, well, if Texas and Georgia are both ranked in the top 4, no, none of that matters. Only whoever wins the SEC championship in Atlanta, that team will be a top 4 seed. There will be no other SEC team in the top 4. You automatically drop down to 5 through 12. And those spots are up for grabs with at-larges, including the top 4 group of 5, who will get an automatic bid if they're ranked high enough. So it's silly. It's stupid. I've been saying this from the beginning. Screw conference winners. It should be 1 through take the teams that are ranked 1 through 12 in your final rankings, because that's what the committee starts doing, right? They're going to start putting out their weekly rankings and rank teams 1 through 25. Just take 1 through 12. And if there's 6 SEC teams in there, so be it. But no, we got to play fair. We got to move people to the front of the line. If you're a conference champion, we got to move to the front of the line. Going to look great when the ACC champ has two or 3 losses, or the Big 12 champ has 2 or 3 losses, or the Big 10 champ has 2 losses. They all move up, and you might have several SEC teams at 10-2 that get left out. And then there's the case of, what if a 10-2 team loses in the SEC championship game and takes their 3rd loss? Do they still get in technically as the 2nd best SEC team? Or are they jumped over by other 10-2 teams? Again, just food for thought. I just think this thing is going to be wild in how it plays out down the stretch. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. Texas fans, sorry if I hurt your feelings. Bama fans, sorry if I hurt your feelings. Just saying what needed to be said this week. Still plenty of season to turn this thing around. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. And hey, for your second listen, check out some of our other great podcasts, including Jonathan Davis does a great job with Locked On Longhorns, and Matt Moscona does Locked On LSU. If you want to check out any of those, check them out wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.